Good evening, friends, to this session. Today we have a very special guest, a very eminent doctor, Dr. Belliappa. Welcome, Dr. Belliappa.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Good evening,
Yeah,
everyone. Good
yeah.
evening.
So let me just give you a brief about Dr. Vikram Belliappa's background. Now, he is a gastrointestinal and hepatobiliary surgeon. He completed his basic surgical training at Kasturba Medical College and then went on to train in liver and pancreatic surgery at Milan and Hong Kong. He has a special interest in gut function and liver disease. He has set up a specialized gastroenterology clinic to handle diseases of the gut in Bangalore. And so, welcome, doctor. Very nice to interact with you this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So,
And
friends, today
I think intro.
we're leaving the line open as well. So, in case you want to ask any questions to doctor as he speaks, you're welcome to do so. Yeah. So, doctor, today we're discussing the importance of gut health, why it has gained so much of prominence today, and why is everybody talking about
Yes.
gut health? In these last few years, we've seen a heavy influx of information about gut health from experts and influencers, not only in YouTube, but even in Instagram and other places where one frequently finds clarity on various subjects related to health. And these days, it seems the hero is the gut. And so we'll, ask you, why is gut becoming so important, and what is gut health all about?
So I think the moment people start talking about something, then there's obviously a problem. And so when you look at the whole terminology, gut health, it's a very broad term, and there is no proper scientific definition of gut health. However, it's a mix of what is there in mainstream science and a bit from the wellness industry. However, if you really look at it, it's a state wherein someone is at absolute comfort, is disease free, is able to eat a normal diet, digest it, and also have the ability to carry on their day to day activities without any obstruction or the requirement of any medical help. Now, I think why this has come to the fore is basically, if you look at it, as humans, and as we have evolved, we have moved a great deal away from our natural diets. We have begun to eat more and more processed foods. We have also moved away from the natural kind of foods that we were more used to, and we have also changed our environment when the point of view of our physical activity has dropped significantly. And we've also had another situation wherein we are now also eating in very different patterns and consuming calories at a very different level, what is much more than what is our regular requirement. This is what is, I would say, causing or triggering uh, gut disturbances. It may not always be a disease, but it is, I would put it as a term, as gut disturbances. When the disturbance becomes or to a greater degree, it will manifest with disease.
So, do you think it's true that the gut's microbiome influence extends far beyond digestion?
Yes. So I think in that sense, if you look at it strangely, the Eastern cultures always put a lot of emphasis on the gut. We in India, traditionally, the Chinese always put a lot of emphasis on what we ate. And there was a lot of this thing of control of our diet. There is now more emerging data and what you call science showing that the way our gut functions is dependent on the microbiome that is within it. Now, the microbiome within it is basically, like, you can equate it to almost like a forest of organisms. There's it's got a rich diversity, it has a rich population, and the way that interacts between the human, the microbiome, and what is the food that goes in, this fine interaction is what keeps our gut well and helps both in absorption of what we eat, prevention of unnecessary substances getting into our guts through our gut barrier into our systems, and messaging to the rest of our body, including the brain, certain important signals that generate and are able to help us be well in totality.
So, doctor, see, is it true that that is estimated that 80% of the immune system is located in the gut, making it a
Yes,
critical line of defense against pathogens? Hence, we should
yes.
be careful about what we consume on a daily basis. Is it true?
Absolutely. So what happens is, if you look at our interfaces, what is the where does the body interface with the environment? So there are really three or four really large spaces where the body interfaces with the environment directly. Our skin, our lungs, and our gut. And for a very long time, the gut, because really was out of sight, not really given that much. It was thought of more as a very benign kind of structure. Just food went in and food went out. It was very that sort of a
Yeah,
structure.
yeah.
Now we're able to understand that the is a very, very dynamic organ. It's not just an innate organ. This interaction between this huge surface that we have in the gut is through which antigens pass through, pathogens pass through. So antigens are like, for example, each food type can trigger and has certain small molecules in it. If it crosses the gut barrier and it is exposed to our immune system, it can trigger allergies, it can trigger intolerances. The same way, if bacteria move across this barrier, it can trigger illnesses. And this reaction is a complex one. It can cause inflammation, infection, and an autoimmune trigger.
Okay. So one of the viewers, Nina Nandra, one of our dedicated viewers, says, "Good evening. All what is the best natural way of reducing bloatedness?"
So I think there are two things. So the basic reason why we get bloating, I think that's, if we understand the mechanism of that, is by and large it tends to be a reason why when we're eating certain food types, they are usually what you call FOD. They call the FOD, kind of FODMAP. These are the things which have basically certain kinds of carbohydrates which are not broken down well in the intestine, and they literally ferment, and they, with along with the gut bacteria, they release more methane and more gases, and then we get a sense of bloatedness. Now, one is the dietary nature. So if you find that you're getting bloating, try to eat more fiber and also maintain a kind of what we call as a food map to identify what may be the triggers in your case. A diet rich in fiber, a diet rich in natural foods, and a diet rich in more what you call high oxidant foods tends to cause less bloating. Physical activity also is a very critical part to make sure that you're physically active. And the third is very important, to be well hydrated. But we do find a slight difference today. We do find people, like you do regularly see people who are going to a gym and, actually quite fit, but they do come to the clinic and, they're saying, I do have this bloating and I'm not feeling comfortable. So one is, I find some of them are consuming very high amounts of supplements. So these are processed foods, and therefore sometimes they need to be aware of, that if they can tone down on those processed foods, they get better. But maintaining a small diary to identify what foods trigger it is a very helpful part.
Yeah. It's very strange, doctor, because today, with the way the people who manufacture products are encouraging children to eat fast food, and with the even the cost of fast food going down drastically. So whenever you feel hungry and you don't feel like cooking, young people rush to these fast food centers and they have their food. And do you think this is one of the biggest problems that Indians are facing today? Because almost every corner has a McDonald's or all these fast food outlets, Indian fast food outlets. And Swiggy is also there. You have Swiggy bringing you food within 5-10 minutes. So Do you think this habit is actually spoiling us?
Yeah. So I think if you look at it, I think, there is what you call the basic calorie requirement that we all humans, I mean, I divide it into two, three things. One is that as we are the only creatures that eat for entertainment. There is no other creature in this world that eats for entertainment. So if this entertainment becomes easily accessible, it is there at a click of a button, it's just around the corner, we will most likely reach out to it and, I would say, misuse it. It can be a great boon, but at the same time, it tends to ultimately, lead to being misused. The
Yeah.
second is that as long as we are consuming processed foods, that is where I think the greater, problem lies. And I think, there should be at some stage some degree of control on, what is accessible for people so that they eat more responsibly.
Yeah. Shreyasta is asking you, doctor, that can you tell us how the ingredients used in the food products harm our gut, and what can we do to prevent this?
Very good question. So I think one is there are two types. One is the ingredients we are not aware of. So, many of these things are not even put on labels. So therefore, I would say as a blanket rule, if you have the option, try not to utilize processed foods. Try to get foods in the natural format and make them at home. Second is there are certain specific ingredients, which are extremely high in preservatives, food colors, additives, emulsifying agents, certain foods which are, for example, very, very high in certain, the famous Ajinomoto and MSG. These are kind of foods that definitely cause more gut damage. And the other aspect is dependent on each individual. See, a person who's lactose intolerant should not be, consuming very high lactose-rich foods. Gluten intolerant people should be avoiding gluten foods. But by and large, all foods which are processed are much worse than the naturally available food products.
Yeah. So I think Shreyasta, is one of the viewers, has joined us. Can I add a doctor? She'd like to ask you something.
Sure, 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 sure.
Yeah. Welcome, Shreyasta.
Hello,
Hello,
Meena, and hello,
hello,
Dr. Vikram.
hello,
Hi,
welcome.
thank you
Hi,
for
hi.
having this session. Doctor, my question is very simple. I mean, today we are in the world where everyone is working, it's a fast-paced life, and you have these climate changes. Sometimes it's hot, it's cold, and I feel like personally, me and I know, 'cause I also work in the data science domain. I see that from my data also, like especially after Corona, my gut health had gone definitely negative, and I spent almost more than a year fixing it. Now I'm better, so I had to really change and have all these good bacteria, and this is something not normal people understand. And like I want you to a bit tell us about what was the impact of this so-called coronavirus, which also the mainstream media really doesn't talk about.
Yes. So there were basically two, three aspects of it. There was an aspect wherein the people who did get COVID did have some degree of gut inflammation. And this gut inflammation also seemed to be, again, highly variable, like COVID itself. So you had people with very, very mild symptoms and ranging to people with very, very severe symptoms. So this gut inflammation in some people seemed to be pretty protracted and triggered a sort of an acquired intolerance to certain food groups, developed a lot of symptomatologies like you were explaining. And it also, for that inflammation to recede, uh, has taken a lot of time. Second issue is also the fact that people who suffered from COVID in the early years or the early phases of COVID treatment, there were many things that I would say even medical science was not aware of what would be the most appropriate treatment. So there were a lot of drugs being prescribed, a lot of medicines being taken to treat people, which may not have been completely based on, very, very solid scientific research. But at that time, there was a short response, it had to be used. These perpetuated some of the problems within the gut. And that is what is one of the reasons why many of the people recovering from COVID had a protracted, GI symptoms too.
Okay.
And I think the
Uh,
way to handle it is to see the inflammatory markers.
okay. This is another question from newbie. He's saying, "Hello, doctor. Should we really choose brown bread, brown pasta over white rice, or balance is okay?"
So I put it this way. I think one is eat local. I think, it's not about brown bread. It's not about pasta. It's about eat local. Eat the foods that are locally available. I'll give you a small example. There was a case study where, people had to, they studied, some of the exotic breads. Now, these breads on paper are excellent because they have certain components, but when they have to be manufactured and be given a shelf life, there are certain additives that need to be added to it. So I think one has to eat balanced, source your food responsibly and locally. I think that would be, rather than food that may have traveled and therefore had to be stored. Second is eat ingredients which have been traditionally in the diet of, the region. Like for example, in North Karnataka, people are comfortable eating jowar. In South Karnataka, we are very comfortable eating ragi. So, if you can eat a naturally, locally occurring food with a balanced diet, nothing to beat it.
Yeah. I think Shreyasa was mentioning earlier that she has moved to natural juices and other natural products coming from India. Maybe Shreyasa, you can talk to doctor about that.
Oh, yes, actually, I had corona three times even after taking the vaccination, which we later came to know is not that good as well after a couple of years. But I saw that the third time it broke my system completely. And I then, of course, when I was recovering, because I'm a practicing research engineer myself. So here also, I'm right now in Germany. So a lot of importance that time was given to gut health, and it was the first time I'm actually against supplements of any kind, but I did start taking supplements that are improving the good gut bacteria, and only after that I saw that my health is better, my mind is better. Otherwise I couldn't get up from the bed. But my main question is mostly during this time only I developed all these lactose intolerance and gluten as well. Previously, my body could have it. Okay, one glass is enough. And of course, as you age, a certain amount of things do weaken in our body. But I see that when I was having the good bacteria supplements, the good gut bacteria, I developed a bit of tolerance and things were better. And the moment I stop it, let's say after 5 to 6 months, because I didn't want to depend on it, the problem I see it starts again. So I want to find a balance between taking these supplements and at the same time at the back of my mind I should be, yeah, you are taking the right kind of things, because you see that you don't know, there are people who are definitely using in the West, they are making products out of insects. They're like, oh, it's a good source of protein and whatnot. Of course, I do agree, but I really, coming
So,
from India, wouldn't want to have
yeah.
insects. So these are
What does doctor have
Yes.
to say? Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting question. So I think, see, I put it this way. One is about the fact that, coming to what you are facing, that this is a classical process where you see sometimes people recovering from an illness, they have an acquired intolerance. That's because, again, in fact, our gut is, two of the most important parts of our gut is the microbiome. That's the all the various microbes that live in our gut, the balance of that, and the gut barrier. Now, the gut barrier is actually not a physical barrier, it's a biochemical, it's a living, breathing barrier. So it's made up of cells, it's made up of layers, so it allows a kind of an interface between the microbiome, which is inside, the structures and the luminal contents inside, and your own system and your immune system. Now, when there is illness, excessive medication, both of these can change. The microbiome can change, the gut barrier can change, and that you have to give it time for it to heal. Now, the taking of a supplement, of taking of a probiotic, if it is helping you up to a point, yes. But if you're having recurring symptoms, that means every time you stop it, you're getting back to square one. or you're getting back to it, then I think you need to start looking at slightly more definitive testing to see whether now there is some other problem that may have set in. Whether there is unmasked a basic intolerance in you is a possibility. I'm not saying it is, but that is something that one has to look at. The other aspect of consuming protein sources of new origin, like there's going to be, I mean, I think, lab grown protein is the, lab
Yeah.
grown meat is what they talk about, meat of this. So I think, in the end of it, if you were to look at everything at a molecular level, protein is protein. But I think what we are also realizing, and that is where the great question between processed food and non-processed food, we are now beginning to understand that we don't handle processed food well. And I can't say I can give you a definitive answer regarding that, but from the history of mankind and the way we've eaten and the way we've developed gut illness, if we move towards more processed foods, I think we will pay the price.
So there's a question from
So as
uh,
natural as possible.
yeah. There's a question from Jay Hanuman. He's saying, since COVID, doctors, a lot of these people have their own names, so you'll be surprised at their names. This is Jay
Okay.
Hanuman.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
So
yeah.
since COVID got used to drinking warm water, even in summer, is it okay to drink warm water in all seasons? And he has also another question that he's asked is, uh, sir, eating a lot of cloves causes gut damage? So these are two questions coming from him.
Two questions. So one is about drinking warm water. So one, to be very frank, actually, there's no particular documented medical advantage of drinking warm water, other than in certain situations it just soothes you. Like for example, you have a sore throat, and it's more like a soothing agent. There is no real medically proven benefit in that
Yeah.
sense. There is definite documentation of people should not consume very hot drinks. Like some people in certain parts of the world drink very hot fluids,
Yes.
and that can actually cause a damage and cause actually narrowing of the food pipe if it is done over a protracted period of time. So again, I think as we see, do what nature ordained. We, by and large, if you can drink room temperature water, would be the ideal. But if it's very, very just mildly warm, I don't think it should cause an issue. But be cautious. I don't think it's really required per se. About cloves, I don't know. I can't speak specifically about cloves, but I can speak of my experience with another substance which is consumed in large quantities because of its medicinal properties, is turmeric. Now, turmeric, as we all know, has medicinal properties, but if it is consumed in excessive amounts, can cause quite significant gastritis and can cause a significant inflammation in the stomach. So I would say even cloves, it's a spice. It does have a chemical substance in it. Eat it in great moderation.
Yeah. Nina is asking you, are probiotics helpful in gas and bloatedness?
Yes. The answer is yes, they are helpful because they definitely help in re-establishing the balance. And that is when your body will be able to break down and allow or not allow over fermentation of the food substances that are there in your gut, which is responsible for being, getting this insertion of bloatedness.
Newbie is asking, my 2-year-old niece is not able to tolerate milk or any milk products now. Why babies have weak gut health? So many children are allergic or intolerant these days. Earlier on, all of this was unheard of.
So I think again there are two aspects to this question. One, I think earlier we didn't know what was happening. So one was, one aspect was there were a lot of people who suffered from the illness, but
Yeah.
we were not aware. So we would just give it nonetheless. So that is one aspect. Second aspect is definitely the incidence of sometimes in many of the children may have this intolerance, especially their premature babies. So I think it's important to also study that because there is a population of premature babies who are tend to be more lactose intolerant. The other aspect is unlike in the past where many of the babies would be breastfed early in their infancy, many of the children now get onto formula feeds, and that is known to cause intolerance and food allergies. So these are some of the things which may have triggered that and made it more obvious nowadays.
Yeah. Also, I heard, doctor, that very popular baby foods like Cerelac, has a lot of sugar content, which is shocking, and people have asked for it to be banned because they say that
Yes.
it's very bad for children. So, as you say, there could be certain foods that are not good for the babies or children, and
Yes.
that could be affecting the gut as well.
Yes. No, I think
Yeah.
it's very true. I think the responsibility to make sure that whatever products are available on the market are, conducive for the people's health and shouldn't be detrimental.
Yeah. Doctor, you have often spoken about, the link between, obesity and bad gut health. So, is it very important that a person should lose weight in order to, rectify the problems that he faces in the gut? And another question added to that is also the latest, surgery that it's not surgery, I guess, when they insert a balloon, as you said, and once it's inserted, then a person eats much less than what he would normally eat, and that would help him reduce weight. So could you tell us about both these aspects, doctor?
Yes. So I think definitely see in people who have had who are overweight and obese, now there is a link being found that they tend to have a disturbed microbiome. Their microbiome, when analyzed, is not that of a normal person. Now, it's very simplistic to say it is only single factor because obesity again is a complex problem. It's not, you can't just blame it only on the microbiome. There's behavioral aspect to it. There is an endocrine aspect to it. There are numerous aspects to it. But one of the things is that these people do have a disturbed microbiome, and losing weight seems to help that microbiome also correct itself. Now, how that weight loss is brought about can be done in three or four different methods. One, of course, is the most natural, which is on diet and exercise. But when the weight gap between what is the desirable, or what is the, I won't say desirable, what is the medically recommended weight for a person's height to what is their actual weight, if the gap is very high, then the traditional methods may not be adequate. I mean, it'd be difficult for people to lose a large quantity of weight, and that's when you need to look at other methodologies. One is the option of using a gastric balloon, wherein this is a temporary process without any surgical intervention. A balloon is placed in the stomach. This definitely helps bring down the satiety. People don't eat as much, they don't absorb as much, and they can lose weight, and then the balloon can be removed endoscopically again. However, this has to be married with the fact that the people are then in that window develop a healthy habit of eating well and exercising well. The more
Yeah.
extreme part is a surgery, which is weight reduction surgery, which is known as bariatric surgery. And the newest entrant are weight reduction drugs, which are there in the new, Ozempic, which is the, rage in the West, but has to be taken with great caution and under medical guidance.
Yeah. So Dina says, thank you, doctor. Most of your answers are very informative and helpful. Thank you for attending Candid Meena.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very
Shreya
much.
says, yeah. Shreya says saying, can you tell us if whey protein is good or not? Or is it another substance that the food and fitness industry wants to push?
So I would put it this way. So whey protein, again, is all in the quantity that one consumes. So we get a fair number of people who come from the fitness industry as patients finally. And I encourage them again to go to try to, whey protein is a purified protein, though it's naturally occurring. We should have, even in our protein intake, the complexity that we consume in a normal diet. It will not give the immediate benefits which one sometimes people want in a gym. I would suggest that one uses whey protein again with great judiciousness, because it's not just the whey protein. It's the fact that it has to be given a shelf life, that there are usually other additives in it. And the whey protein manufacturing, many of it doesn't come under normal regulation because it's a wellness product, it's not a medical product in many cases. The medical food products are usually screened very carefully. We use food supplements in our medical practice, but they are screened very aggressively, whereas the wellness products are not screened with that same level of scrutiny. So I would say use it with great caution.
Nina says, I have hiatus hernia. Is it food related? Does any special diet and physiotherapy is any, I think what she means is there any special diet and physiotherapy available for this?
That's correct. So, if you have a hiatus hernia, it is unlikely to be related to the food you particularly ate. Hiatus hernia usually occurs because of either it's a defect that was there, more or less at birth or gradually developed, and it is not. It's and because of that, you will find that certain foods and certain things will not agree with you. Most people with a hiatus hernia may develop reflux or reflux, gastric GERD, what is normally called GERD. And in that situation, what is we tell people definitely to avoid certain kinds of food that makes reflux worse. Aerated drinks, caffeinated drinks, extremely sour, foods. These are things that one has to cut down with it. Physiotherapy per se will not help. However, weight reduction. I wouldn't say physiotherapy is not a specific kind of exercise that will help only the hiatus hernia, but overall weight reduction can make the symptoms much better.
Yeah. Dhanashri is asking, what can be a substitute for Cerelac?
Oh, excellent question. I think again, again, if people predominantly here in South Karnataka, I think the ready-made mix was ragi. We all were brought up on ragi. So I think again there are excellent natural traditional weaning products that is there in all our cultures pan India. I'm
Yeah.
only citing this because I'm from here, but there are these weaning products that are there pan India which have been used for a long time. The only issue was that it is a little inconvenient sometimes to try and make it. They are not that easily reconstitutable as Cerelac. But if I think there are now new products that are coming in that way, and I think the ability to make these mixes and keep them at home, it's I think these are the options that definitely should be explored.
Yeah. Doctor, see, this is a question from me that, see, most parents, you'll find that in today's age, both of them are working. And it's very difficult for them to, for the mother to cook and, or even the father to cook and rush to office. So what happens is they give some money to the child and the child picks up something from the, the tuck shop in the school, or, buys some a burger or something. So what happens is a lot of our lifestyles are being compromised by modern demands, because you can't blame the mother or the father because both of them are equally busy, and perhaps they cannot afford to have a full-time cook as well. So in such circumstances, what is your advice to parents that what they should do to make sure that these children see, because as you say, when they're children they do not realize they have problems. The problem grows as they grow older. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and then there comes a time when they can't handle it, and then they go to the doctors. So please tell us, doctor, like, what would be your advice to parents who are so busy they can't give nutritious food to their children?
I mean, there are really two aspects to it. I think one is, it really involves, if the parents will have to, because if children are going to be eating out, then, it can never be the same as eating, a simple home cooked meal. I do understand the logistical problems, two parents working. uh, I think I myself come from a family like that. I mean, myself and my wife, we do work, and we do have a pretty busy schedule. But I think what we've learned to do is we cook on the weekend. I mean, sometimes the
Yeah,
food we give our
exactly.
children is not exactly fresh, but at least it's homemade and it's packed and sent with them over the weekend. So you'll have to make it work. Look at simpler solutions. Doesn't have to be very complex food. Sometimes can be very simple foods. Just a chapati and bhaji, made into a roll with some paneer in it. Something very, very simple. But I think, looking at easy options would far better, than them going out and eating.
Yeah,
The other aspect is, I think, as children grow up, and I think in this modern day and age, there are some really nice modern gadgets. I think they should also learn to cook some simple
yeah,
things. I think there's nothing wrong.
absolutely.
A child who's 15 plus can make a small snack for himself or
Yeah.
herself.
Also, do you feel that the schools should be more, aware of this and to educate the
Yes.
children? Because, see, for example, in schools in Japan and all, you'll find that the children are very actively involved in growing vegetables and knowing nutritional values of these, and also learning cooking. So, do you think it's very important for the present education ministry to take this as a serious aspect where children are taught this and taught to, even cook, as you say, there are certain gadgets that you can use. So, if it is, introduced as a subject in school, do you think it'll be useful for us to learn about,
I think it will,
nutrition?
yes, absolutely. I think it'll be priceless because there was a study done of in children with fatty liver,
Yeah.
and in metropolitan India there are schools for particular class. 50% of the children had fatty liver. These are children with fatty liver.
Mm.
So it already shows how deep this problem is now in our society. I think if children, that awareness amongst children, that they need to be cognizant about what they eat, they have to be aware about what they eat. And yes, in this busy world, we are not going to become less busy in any way. They have to also take ownership about their own health. So children who are of a particular age, once they're teenagers and above, they should be actively participating in their food choices.
Yeah. And you speak about fatty liver. A lot of the people are, complaining about fatty liver. How does it? How does this happen? And what are the prevention causes for
So
this?
fatty liver, we by and large see, is again a lifestyle-related disease in majority. There is a small number whom it is not a lifestyle disease; it's purely endocrinological problem, where they tend to have diabetes and diabetes-related issues. But by and large, it's a cycle of process where there is a very high calorie consumption, a relatively low calorie burn, or a sedentary life, which then results in a higher deposition of fat throughout the body, including the liver, and that is basically fatty liver. The
Or is
prevention
it not
again
because
comes.
you're eating butter and those sort of things?
It's not just because of eating that specific product. It's
Ah,
about the net calorie consumption versus the net calorie burn. Definitely, these foods like butter and things like that are richer in calories. But if you look at, like for example, a place like Haryana, the Haryana farmers and Punjab farmers eat a lot of butter. But
yes,
the farmers who are in the farm and working hard are
yeah,
healthy. But those who move to the urban areas, they will still keep those dietary habits, but not the physical aspect.
yes, yes,
And then the deterioration starts. So the similar thing, it's the calorie burn that is also very critical.
yeah. So there's a question from Shreya Sir. She says, "Sir, what is a good age to start for a checkup of the internal organs?"
Organs. So again, a good question. I think there are two aspects. I think the first is, rather than I try to again answer it with a kind of a different angle. I would say the most important is at an early age, we must encourage our children to have healthy habits. If they have healthy habits, everything else will be put to rest. Their way they eat, the fact that they exercise well, these are very important. But by and large, like a regular health checkup is recommended for a person on a routine basis. By and large, once they are somewhere actually in their 40s, when the moment they start to see, that's when you start requiring a regular checkup. Now, people do it mandatorily now. When you go for a job, a health checkup is done. They're ubiquitous and they're available everywhere. And also, I would say people need to have a health checkup who have high risk factors. If there's a family member who's diabetic, there's a family history of cardiac disease, family history of malignancy, or a person is at high risk because of their weight, then I think an earlier health checkup is recommended.
Yeah. And also, do you think that our modern lifestyle, as in when we come back from work, we relax in front of the TV, especially since now OTT platforms are available, people relax in front of the TV and have their food also there, which means it's less exercise and they're all moving around in cars. So, which means the activity level is very less compared to what it was much before, where you used to walk a lot. It's unlike certain countries where people use bikes and walk a lot. So, is there something that at a government level that they should be telling the citizens of India that you need to walk more, do yoga, do all these things? Of course, Prime Minister is saying that
Yes.
do more yoga, but what would you say? As a doctor, things have to change, and people like you need to advise.
Yes.
What our children should be doing, what the adults should be doing to change the pattern. We are going in a wrong direction.
Yes. So I think, definitely, like you said, the average amount of movement that every person is doing is coming down so dramatically. Almost I can talk about my generation. We all walk to school. That was one of the simplest things. Everybody got up and walked to school, or you cycle to school. Now that is an almost
Yeah, we
non-existent
cycle to school.
school. It is not there now. I mean, you
Yeah,
cannot. I mean, so I think we have to look at, if you're looking at it from a policy angle, I think the education from the government side, and as you mentioned, the Prime Minister has made a lot of effort to really make people understand the importance of yoga and exercise. But I think unless it's made kind of mandatory in some sense, I would say it would be fantastic if it was possible for the cities to be decongested so that people can cycle.
yeah,
I think cycling is a fantastic exercise. It's got everything that is ideal for it, but it has to be safe. We have to be breathing good air. You need to have safe roads to cycle on. So I tell people, grab exercise in whatever format you can. If you go to a building, try to use the stairs, try not to use the lift. If you, living at home, within a 5 kilometer radius, don't order in, walk there, pick it up and come. These simple, small things, if you can put into your life. And then, yes, if you can up it to doing formal exercise or playing a sport, nothing like it.
yeah. One thing I remember, doctor, you said about your children. You said that, see, if they want an ice cream, you make them walk for it, go to the shop and buy
Yes,
it rather than order it on Swiggy.
yes,
So that's something
yes,
that, remained in my mind
yes,
after you said that.
yes,
Very,
yes,
very interesting. Yeah.
yeah,
And Nina
yes.
says, since the hiatus hernia, I get palpitations. Is there a connection?
Yes. So what happens is hiatus hernia is very often related with episodes of reflux. So what happens in that is suddenly gastric contents can reflux up into your food pipe, which normally is not used to being exposed to acidic content. That can trigger a feeling of palpitation, tightness, and that is one of the symptomatology that is there. Now, if a person is having these episodes, one thing is that one should first rule out whether there is a cardiac problem. So, one must not only assume that it's because of reflux, do make sure that there is no fundamental cardiac problem first, because that is also life threatening. So, make sure that that's seen by a cardiologist and you make sure that that is not there. Then there are tests to identify whether it is because if the cardiac problem has been excluded, there are tests to, make sure that is that due to the reflux and endoscopy. There are acid measurement techniques and pressure measurement techniques that tell us that it is probably due to that. And of course, the response to medication that tell us that. But yes, it can be connected.
Yeah. Now, question away from this, doctor. Perhaps I don't know whether you'd like to answer it, and that is, a lot of the people today are very wary to go to hospitals because even when they have small sicknesses or bigger ones, because what happens is the moment they go to a hospital, they feel that they're being pushed to use machines unnecessarily. They're being put to take tests unnecessarily, and what happens is the human element goes away. So, friends, I'd just like to tell you about my own experience with Dr. Belliappa. And I found, going to Dr. Belliappa very, very comforting because, first of all, the way he's got his clinic, you don't feel the fear when you go, to a hospital. You're always scared. But when I went to Dr. Vikram's, clinic, it was just like going home. Then the interaction with the doctor, Dr. Vikram is very, very comforting. The way he talks to a patient, is very soothing. And I had to undergo an endoscopy, and I was terrified. But it was done so smoothly that I can't explain, how good I felt after that. So this is an experience that people want, Dr. Belliappa, and not many doctors are, giving that, and that's why people are scared of going to hospitals because of other interests. People are selling the machinery and the kind of pact that they have at the hospital. Where doctors are forced to comply if they have to get some sort of commissions. So I don't know whether you'd like to answer this question. So
So I think I'd agree with you. See, the compulsions of practice, I mean, are there. I mean, I think I don't necessarily need to answer. It's evident. I mean, it's there. People are aware of it. The very fact that people are aware and are skeptical of it means it is an issue. I mean, we have to address it. And I think there are two ways of addressing it. I think one is the self-governance of the medical community. I think, we as doctors have to introspect, and I don't think any law can stop it or any law can amend it. It is us who has to make it. The medical community has to sort it out. And I would say in majority of the cases, I would say most people are judicious. Most doctors are. There will be the odd, situation that is off. And the second is, I think patients should also be educated, which most people
Yeah.
are. I mean, I think that is also a good check and balance, because when an educated patient asks an educated question, I think it puts doctors also on, keeps them on their toes. And I think that's rightfully so. I mean, there should be a check and balance. Then I think there is also a push that is going to come. I mean, it is inevitable. It has come from the government. It has come from that, that there will be some degree of control on the way which, healthcare expenditure is kept, within, the affordability of the common man.
Yeah. Recently, Doctor, there were a couple of, masala brands that were banned in, I think, in UK, and these are top brands from India, which we use, MDH and another brand. I don't know whether it's Everest or some brand, another brand which is top. So these are brands that we use, in every household. So India never came to know that there is something wrong with these brands. So do you think, now this is something else I'm asking you, do you think that since India is growing very fast and moving very fast, that there can be some mischief, sometimes when people say that, see, these brands are not good, and India doesn't care too much about a brand, finding out that the brands are,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, following
Yeah.
the rules.
So I think, to answer that question, um, I don't think any brand is can be absolved. When I mean, we know of brands which were, famous brands which have been taken to task, international brands, across the world, not only in India. So I believe the moment there is commerce and there is huge benefit to be gained, all sorts of parameters will come out. There will be justifiable criticism, there will be unjustified criticism. And that is where, again, I feel I come back to the same point. This is where I think, self governance is important. Like we, highlighted that is a baby food which is having, excessive sugar and,
Exactly.
which
Yeah.
we, there is the same brand sold in another country and another continent
Yeah.
is very cognizant of the rules there. So I think, it comes as two things. Society should not hesitate to, raise these issues. Then automatically people will take notice. Even brands are very careful today to see that, public opinion is very powerful. So public opinion must remain and must be free to express itself. Second is governance. I mean, the government, if it's there to, this thing is important. And I think we should be, I mean, brands also have to take criticism. I mean, if they've done
Yes.
something,
Exactly.
they should take the criticism and accept it. I mean, there's no, I think that's very important.
Yeah. And also, Doctor C, when you look at an Indian's diet, an Indian diet, what is it that, see, you would say is a, a good diet? As in, see, for example, a South Indian diet, normally people would have idlis, and then you have, you go on to chapatis and curry, and then evening some sort of snack, and then, before sundown, you finish your meal by around 6 o'clock. Again, something very light. So, what do you think is a, sort of a good meal for Indians who don't want a westernized, diet?
Like that.
Uh, you know.
So I think, I would say the Indian thali, this
Mm.
traditional Indian thali kind of epitomized the a kind of a perfect balanced diet.
Yeah.
Where you had a portion of cereal, you had pulses, you had vegetable, it had all the components of the food pyramid that we wanted. And the only problem is that in modern day, we switched that thali into the unlimited thali. And then, we went just eating like no. So
Yeah.
so the simple thali, the humble thali, which has all its components, is a perfect Indian diet. Now that there will be a slight difference between north and south, preference for wheat in one place, maybe a preference for rice in one place, a preference for jowar in another. I don't think that is something that we need to be too worried about. I think it's the portions that is also very important. The mix should be right. That is, cereal, pulse, vegetable, protein. That mix is very important. And the other aspect is, as I said, local and as fresh and as unprocessed foods as is possible. The third aspect, which I think is very, very important, is the fact that we must maintain our culinary diversity. It is something that we've begun to lose and is being lost the world over. I think we all, especially if anybody is grown up, predominantly also eating, our very traditional foods. India was blessed with tremendous diversity. We all, from whichever part of the country we came from, I think we all remember our grandmother's time. I mean, unfortunately, now it's eroding very rapidly. We would, in every season, you ate a great diversity. You ate very different foods, most of them very naturally occurring. And because of that, you would get all your micronutrients, you get all your vitamins, minerals, everything, because it was spread across such a diversity. We should not lose our dietary diversity.
And do you think as you grow older, the diet pattern should also change to suit your body needs?
Yes. Yes, I think definitely it's been proven beyond point that at a particular, as we age, we may become more and more intolerant to certain food types, even lactose. As we age, we may not tolerate lactose very well. We may not able to stomach spice very well. And I think, toning our diets down, our body will tell you what you're comfortable eating. So I think that is also very important. Just listen to your body, eat what is required. And as long as it's possible, again, that balance between calories consumed and calories burnt, that balance has to be there. And I think that is what leads to good health.
Yeah. Doctor, could you tell us, see, when you specialized, why did you choose a gut? Uh, you know,
Okay,
just
yeah.
my
So
curiosity.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah. So I think I found it fascinating. I think, I don't think I didn't start off with this idea. I think part of it was as I trained, I was fortunate to train with a couple of my professors who were, real subject experts at that time, and they were the source of inspiration. And, you watch work being done, and that inspired me. But I think that would be the only, I think there were excellent teachers that I had along the way who inspired me, and then I wanted to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah, great. And also, just one last question before we sort of wind up. The question is, many people say that, see, when you have a diabetic tendency, it's always better to have some sort of vinegar, vegetables in vinegar, and or have some protein before you take your carbohydrate. Is that a right advice?
I don't think there's a medical backing for
Mm,
that. I don't think there's any medical backing for that concept. No,
okay.
I
So
think
even
it's
if you
it's
have
more
your,
of common belief.
yeah, carbohydrates, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
fine. You will
I think
have
it's
your
more
meal.
about, if as long as you're able to burn the calories and the calorie intake is under control, and the nature of the calorie, again, you make it complex carbohydrate rather than, simple carbohydrates, then it makes more sense.
Yeah. So, what would be your advice to the people listening to you? They're all from different parts of the world, and they have their schedules. So, what is it about modern life, and what you should take care of, that would be your advice to all of them?
So I think the first part, I think, would be wherever one is sometimes just be conscious of what you're doing. I think sometimes, in the sheer rush of life, we are not even conscious of what we are doing to ourselves, and what we're consuming. Just, literally, I'd say sometimes just stop for a minute. Be conscious of what we are doing, what we're eating, what are we doing with our lives. I think that's the real simplest starting point. Just be conscious, think about it, and then automatically many of the answers will follow. The next, I think, is just I think there's a very, very simple a life of moderation is probably the finest. We as humans have evolved from the hunter gatherer scavenger kind of background. We are designed to eat anything and everything, but in the right proportions. And I think stress is ubiquitous, we will all have it, but how we can handle it and manage it is something that we have to, you know have to learn.
Thank you, Doctor. It was a wonderful session with you answering some of the questions as well. And hopefully, we'll be able to connect again sometime later.
Sure.
Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for
Good
this
night.
opportunity.
Jai Hind and Jai Shri Ram.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.